This is Riley Catherall on Retrospectives with John Broughton, here on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
I guess at the moment you're about to experience something that artists and bands only really get to experience once in their career, and that is the release of their first full-length album. So I imagine a pretty special feeling.
Absolutely. It's, equally exciting and terrifying all the same. It's been a long time coming, and it feels nice to have a body of work that, is my first full-length piece of work, and pretty proud of it.
I guess there'd be some mixed feelings too, considering the climate we're in at the moment and the lay of the land as it's been for the last 18 months, not being able to make any plans with great certainty. I mean, no doubt you'll be hoping to do a string of gigs to promote this record and hoping that they don't get hijacked by lockdown after lockdown.
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to book anything too far in advance. And even in doing so, you run the risk of, those plans being ripped out from underneath you last minute. So I don't know, I'd rather have gigs booked that I have to reschedule rather than no gigs booked at all. So it's just, about playing the waiting game and with your fingers crossed.
Yep, hope for the best, absolutely. I just want to cover a bit of background before we talk about the record specifically, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Can you pinpoint a time when music really affected you growing up to the point that you wanted to pursue it as a creative endeavour?
I don't think I ever really had a choice. And I mean that in a good way. I had, Mum was a piano teacher and Dad was always playing guitar when I was younger. And I remember going in for show and tell in kindergarten and primary school with Slim Dusty songs that I'd, learnt at home. So I think when it came to the, what are you going to do with your life, part of high school, I was already sort of doing pub gigs here and there, and 15, 16-year-old in the pub, Dad would happily take me and be my my legal guardian in that regard. And I think after leaving school and realizing I used to be pretty sporty, but my younger brother was just better at every sport than me. So then I thought, okay, well, I'm pretty good at this music thing. Why don't I just go, all eggs in that basket?
Listening to your music, the first place I'm transported to is that early 70s singer-songwriter era. I do get that vibe. Is that an era of music that had a big inspiration for you?
Absolutely. I think, the likes of James Taylor and Neil Young and Carole King, Jackson Browne, people like that, was such a huge influence on me. And definitely when I stepped into the country music world a few years ago, somewhere where I didn't necessarily think I'd ever be, I realized that the likes of those guys sort of made up this, what we now call that alt country Americana thing, but really back then was just good songwriting. And I think that's at the core of any music, really. And I think the vast world of country music is represented in that. And I feel like I just found a home in the alt country thing because it did represent that, that early 70s sort of sound. Yeah, for sure.
Do you think you would have liked to have been around in that era, embarking on a music career?
Absolutely. I definitely, a lot of my idols are from that era, and a lot of them are still making music now, but I think there's definitely a golden time of certain albums which have come about at around the same time, and it'd just be absolutely.
You comfortable with that Americana tag? Is that something you're okay with being applied to your music?
Yeah, it's funny, because obviously I'm not in America, and I feel as though the Americana tag, it's definitely got some weight to it, but I feel like it's losing a little bit, and it seems to be a tag that people apply when they don't really know how to categorize it. It's that not quite country, not quite folk, not quite rootsy rock and roll sort of stuff. And I feel like a few years ago, Americana was all the rage, and I feel like now it's all the same sort of sounding stuff, but it's under this label of alt country. And I feel like, especially being in Australia and especially being around the people that I surround myself, particularly down in Melbourne, it seems to be that the alt country tag is more suitable.
Looking back at those early days playing music up in Canberra, where it all began for you, in terms of opportunity and places to play live music venues that suited your type of music, was there a lot going up there?
There was, to a degree. Like, I definitely owe a lot of the development and the evolution, I guess, of honing your craft to those times. A lot of it was just covers gigs, and there was a nice little original scene, but it definitely didn't have the same opportunities as I saw in Melbourne and even in Sydney and overseas when I had travelled a little bit. And so I think I was just after somewhere where I was surrounded by lots of people with the same mindset, and I found that in Melbourne.
So the Melbourne move was always inevitable, or was it a toss-up between Melbourne and Sydney at some point?
Yeah, realistically, I mean, a lot of people, where I grew up, a lot of people went to Sydney, and I'd only been down to Melbourne a couple of times, but a few people that I'd spoken to, they spoke of this city that is never asleep. There's music on literally, every night of the week, and I felt like that was more so where I probably would fit in.
Did it take time to settle here, to find a niche?
Absolutely. I think for the first 18 months, I barely played any shows. It was sort of about me going around, watching gigs, seeing how the people in the scene that I'd like to be in, sort of seeing how they do things. And I just knew that once I started and once I found myself in the country music and where I'm making music now, I was like, when I start, I don't want to stop. And I knew that I didn't want to go in half-baked at all. And so there was definitely a period of just sort of learning and, learning humility, and also learning that there are lots of people out there doing what I do and doing it really well, and just sort of figuring out whereabouts I would fit in.
Along the way, you've had some great support and validation from other wonderful musicians and writers, both Casey and Bill Chambers. Lachlan Bryan comes to mind as well. Tell us about how those associations came about and the shot of confidence it must have given you at the time to have that nod of approval.
Absolutely. I think my first little step into the country music world in particular, I, on a whim, found myself in Tamworth on a recommendation from a friend, and I didn't know what to expect. I, as I said, never really saw country music or that scene as something that I would endeavour into, and soon after I met Casey, and we did a little bit of writing together, and I played a couple of shows for her, and then I met her dad Bill, and we did an EP together, and it was really nice to have people like that, of that caliber, take me under their wing, and I definitely think it fast-tracked those finding your feet moments of stepping into a new world, and really grateful for that. And then more recently, playing with Lachlan Bryan and the Wilds, and having Lachlan and Damien Caffarella and Sean Ryan and people like that take me under their wing. People have been around for a couple of decades and really know the ins and outs of how the scene works, and who and who to listen to, and all of those important things. I definitely think that vote of confidence was really important early on, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, there really does seem to be a great sense of community amongst the country folk and roots music fraternity in Australia. I don't get a sense of competition amongst you all at all. I think there's very much a high degree of mutual support.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the drawing points that I noticed early on in other scenes that I'd been in. I used to do the sort of obviously the cover music scene where it's all a competition, but also like the jazz and blues thing, which is really cool, but there's definitely a sense of community. No one's holding cards to their chest in the country music world. It's all about collaboration and writing together and being on stage together, and everyone just wants to help out. We're all, trying to get somewhere with our writing and our performing, and there's no need to, I guess, compete against other people for the same goal.
Let's talk about this fantastic new record, which is about to see the light of day. It seems to be a trend these days to drop a few singles of songs in advance of an album release, and you did this as well. Were you quite specific in your planning of which songs to drop first and in what order to put them out to get an initial feel out there as what the album was going to be like?
Not particularly. I think I'd always wanted to do a full-length record, but when I first dropped Leave Me Out to Dry about this time last year, I didn't know if this COVID thing was going to stick around for any length of time, but I put that out. That was just a favourite song of mine, and it wasn't until our second lockdown down here that I really sort of was left in my own thoughts for a long period of time to realize that I had this collection of songs. And so it wasn't until Vacant Lot, which was earlier this year, that I realized that all of these songs sort of encapsulated a thematic period of my life where it was about leaving, like moving out of home and traveling around, touring, and also just trying to find somewhere where I fit in. So I think Vacant Lot was definitely my first little step into, all right, I'm going to put a record out and this is what it's about. And then the latest single, Mother Please, is sort of the first little step into that period of my life as well. So there was a little bit of, intention with it all, but picking singles is such a hard thing to do. I obviously like them all. That's why they're all on the record, but certain things work better on radio.
I was going to mention the theme of the songs through the album. There is that sense of moving on, of being out on your own in the big world and leaving. And so very much a personal feel to the songs. Can it be a cleansing experience writing songs of a personal nature, a purging of emotions, so to speak? I
think so. A lot of people will tell you that it's a cathartic thing, like it will help you get through things. I know I, for one, need a little bit of perspective to write songs like that. I can't do it in amidst, the heightened emotional state. Otherwise, it is just dribble a lot of the time. And so, I definitely think that a lot of these songs come from taking a step back from any of these situations or being past them in a sense. And I think the record as a whole, it's a nice point for me now to put it out, obviously, because it's a piece of work that I'm proud of, but it also sort of signifies the end of that period. I feel like I'm a whole lot more settled, both in my personal life and in I guess figuring out where I fit as a songwriter and a musician.
What sort of time period do these songs cover?
Yeah, so it's about, I think the oldest one, Mother Please, might even be the oldest song, and that was probably three or 4 years ago. So there was a big chunk of the last few years which was just ridden with upheaval and uprooting. I've lived in Melbourne for 5 years, and I think I've moved house 6 or 7 times. So
wow.
It's one of them things where it didn't matter where I was, I just didn't really feel settled. And now where I am now, I've realized that it's not necessarily about the suburb or the house that you're living in, but more so the people you surround yourself with. And I think it comes back to that first little point of living down here in Melbourne, just for trying to figure out, who your family was.
Mother Please, certainly one of the more personal songs on the album, written for your mum, obviously. Tell us about that one and her reaction when you first played it to her.
Yeah, this was, so we had a bit of a tradition. When I was younger, we lived on a pretty bad dirt country road, just outside of Canberra, and I got my P plates when I was 17 or 18, and I was always out doing what 17 or 18-year-olds do when they have a bit of independence, and in turn I'd be coming home late at night, and Mum would always wait up for me, and I'd walk in the door, she'd be sitting up with the light on reading a book, and we'd both say goodnight. And I think this was a song for when I moved out of home and I wasn't coming home every night, just to sort of say, you don't have to wait up for me anymore, but at the same time, don't forget about me. And she cried the first time she heard it, and it's obviously her favorite song for one reason or another. And it's definitely a special song for me because it sort of is that first little point of me leaving home and going out into the real world, and is very reminiscent of that tradition.
And not to be outdone, your dad gets a mention too on Dad, the Devil and I. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, Dad wasn't too happy that Mum had a song and Dad didn't have a song. So, yeah, Dad's one of my biggest role models, and he actually wasn't too happy. The song sort of points out the fact that he's a bit of a tight ass when it comes to money, and I had to preface the entire song with, I wish I was like you. So the opening line is, I hope I'm like him. Mm-hmm. And he used to play for a rugby team when I was younger called the Hall Bushrangers. And his real name's Michael, but his nickname is Ned. And so for a period of my childhood, I just assumed that my dad was this infamous outlaw. And I thought there has to be some correlation between that and, having a significant other, your partner, sort of reeling you back from a life of crime. And I definitely think that his dad was like that, and I feel like Dad's like that, and I feel like I'm a little bit like that as well.
The family tradition.
Yep.
And of course, the old cliche for songwriters is that the first album is the easiest because you've got your whole life's work of songs there to choose from to put on the record, but album number 2 is the tough one because you have to come up with something new. How's your storage chest of songs looking now after this album?
Yeah, I've had bits and pieces come to mind. I've done a little bit of writing. It's so tricky. The one thing that I've found about putting out an entire record is the easy part is writing and recording the songs, but it's all the business side afterwards, which is the stressful part. So I haven't really done a whole lot of putting on the songwriting hat lately, but I feel like I've got a few things sitting there ready to be written, and they're definitely a little bit different too. So I am also very excited to get this record out as it signifies the end of that period, and I can also move on and start writing something else.
Tell us about the other players on the album, their backgrounds.
Yeah, so for the most part, I was pretty adamant on getting my band on this record. There are lots of brilliant session musicians that I know and that I've played with over the years in the country world, and there's something about my band that I just really wanted to represent what we do on stage onto this record. And they're people that I've been friends with for years, and that they might not necessarily be the across the board session players that listen to the song once and get on stage and nail it like a lot of people that I know. But I feel like the work that we've put in on tour and on stage in the last few years was important to represent on this record. And so in that I've got Gabrielle Parker on vocals. She's plays a feature over the entire record. My good friend Alex is on the drums, and he mastered and did a whole lot of the production as well. Joel on bass, he's brilliant. Ryan on some guitars, and then I also had Damien Caffarella and Lachlan Bryan from the Wilds, play a big part on piano and guitars, and Kath also recorded it. And then I had a few ring-ins. Dylan Nurr from Parkville fame, he's on fiddle, and Ruby Jones from Clary Brown and the Banging Rackets did a few vocals as well. So it's a nice little tight-knit group, and I'm actually excited to now do a few shows and get everybody on stage to play those songs the way that they were recorded.
One of the first things that struck me about the record was just the overall sound and the arrangements. No one could accuse you of overproducing. It's not cluttered. It's very sparse. And what it does is allows the song to really stand on its own merits. I guess that would have been important to you.
Absolutely. Like, I think a few years ago, it was probably Casey who pointed that out to me, that sometimes it's not about getting the most perfect vocal take or dressing songs up so much. Maybe it's about the imperfections, giving these songs a bit of character, and also, like not taking away from what the song is about and taking away from the actual songwriting. So it was a very intensive move to not overproduce things, and less is more was a lot. Was something that was thrown around the studio a whole lot. And yeah, like, does it need it? Don't put it in there if you don't think it absolutely has to be there. So yeah, I think it was just important to really showcase the songs for what they needed to be, rather than this prejudice of wanting to put a big guitar solo and 6 different guitar sounds onto every track.
Yeah, no, you've achieved that beautifully. One of the standout songs for me was Keep You Up My Sleeve, and I saw it described as your Elliott Smith moment. Tell us about that one, and was it a sound reminiscent of Elliott Smith that you were trying to achieve there?
Yeah, for sure. This was a song that I co-wrote with Sean Ryan. It was a 3 a.m. moment after lots of wine, and we'd actually just finished editing another one of my songs, and we thought, let's start another one. And so it was one of them little songs about not a whole lot, that is just full of sarcasm and cynicism, and I think that sort of represents both Sean and I to a T. And when it came to recording it, I think because it was a song that just sort of poured out of us, and I didn't have the same elongated attachment to it, sort of meant that I was able to try something different when it came to recording. And so the way we did it, I'd always wanted to do that Elliott Smith, the doubled vocals thing.
Yeah.
And it was funny, this song really was only finished a couple of weeks before we stepped into the studio, so I hadn't played it that many times. And so a technique that we tried was, the very start of the recording process, like the first day or the second day, was actually recording a vocal take to it. And then not until the very end of recording doing the second take. So they were completely different vocal takes. Because otherwise I'd probably stand up there. It's not a very, there's no vocal acrobatics on that song. So I knew that if I'd done it one after the other, I'd probably make them sound too similar. So yeah, I think doing, again, those imperfections, I think, is what made it. And doing doubled things is such a fine art that I hadn't tried before, and it was, just a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, you nailed it, for sure. Obviously, leaving home, moving to a new city, and the transition involved it's provided you with great fodder for songwriting over the last few years. But with that part of your life behind you, and as you say, you're much more settled now, does it now free you to shift your focus as a songwriter in terms of subject matter?
For sure, and I think that will probably be, one of the trickier things. I'm lucky that I have found a good co-writing partner in Sean and a few other people. Sort of means that you have more ideas and different life experiences to draw on, and I'm getting a whole lot better at taking an idea or taking a subject matter and having a little bit more creative freedom with it, stretching the truth a little bit. Because I mean, if I wrote about my life for the last 18 months, there wouldn't be a whole lot to write about. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next in my life, and being able to write about it.
For sure. I know over the last 18 months, overseas touring is not something you could consider, but prior to this COVID era that we've been in, has there been any interest over there?
Yeah, I was over there. I was in the UK and parts of Europe with Lachlan Bright and the Wilds and Imogen Clark there in 2019. And we were set to go back, last year and this year. And I had my own shows and own festival spots. So it's nice to know that, when things do open up, there is the potential to head back over there and have an audience there. But, I guess this is just forcing us to look inwards and look at the national side of touring.
And what is the plan of attack over the next few months, Riley, considering or hoping that you're allowed to do everything you want to do?
Yeah, I think really like the end game at the minute is just tour and play as many shows as we're allowed to. We've obviously all been very deprived of that. And so, I've got an album launch tour booked in from August through to October. A lot of the August dates are obviously up in the air, and a few have already been cancelled. But the tour is going to see us travelling, all the way up to Queensland, New South Wales, the ACT, down to South Australia, and a couple of Melbourne shows too. So we're just hoping that they go ahead.
Well, you are on a double bill with the Weeping Willows at our very radio station as well, late August, so we're hoping that still goes ahead.
Yeah, that's I'm looking forward to that. Andy and Laura are two dear friends of mine and phenomenal musicians and phenomenal people, so that'll be a good night.
Well, we're putting this to air in the lead up to that, so all going well. That will happen. And look, congratulations on a fantastic debut, Riley. It's one of the best debuts I've heard for many a long time. Some fantastic songs there. And we're only a couple of days away from release as we speak, but it'll be well and truly out there by the time this goes to air. And hopefully charting all over the place.
That'd be very nice. You've got a copy in the mail, so that should get to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Riley. All the best.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you soon. We'll see you down the station.